Ancient history was rewritten in secret. The borders of empires and the rise of civilizations were often decided not by public battles, but by clandestine pacts made far from public view. This is the hidden history of the ancient East, a story of the 27 secret alliances that truly changed the map. By the end of this journey, you will understand how a single whispered agreement could redirect the flow of history for centuries. How did a secret peace treaty between two bitter rivals stabilize the entire Near East? What was the hidden partnership that allowed a small merchant republic to control the wealth of the Mediterranean? The answers lie in the shadows, where kings and chieftains made deals that reshaped our world. What do you think is the most powerful force in history, the public declaration or the private promise? A single misplaced word could topple a dynasty. In the ancient world, where trust was as fragile as papyrus, secrecy was not just a tool but a vital craft. Without telegrams or encrypted emails, rulers relied on a network of trusted couriers, men whose loyalty was beyond question. Messages were carefully etched onto clay tablets, sometimes using coded language or obscure dialects to baffle any interceptors. The most binding agreements were sworn in the name of powerful gods, invoking divine wrath upon any who would break their word. These oaths were the ancient equivalent of an unbreakable digital signature, feared and respected. To cement these fragile understandings, alliances were forged with deeply personal bonds. A royal marriage was not merely a romance, it was a strategic merger, weaving the fates of two kingdoms together with bloodlines. The exchange of royal hostages, often sons or brothers, served as a living, breathing guarantee of good behavior, and gifts were never simple presents, they were laden with meaning, a golden chariot or a herd of prized horses symbolizing the immense value of the partnership. The survival of an entire people could hinge on the absolute silence surrounding such an arrangement. Betrayal was not just a political misstep, it was a cataclysm. The consequences of a broken pact could echo for generations, leading to ruinous wars and the utter erasure of a kingdom from the map. This explains why so many of these foundational deals remained shrouded in mystery, their details lost to time, hidden deliberately from the official records. The methods of concealment were, in their own right, as sophisticated as the diplomacy they protected. This foundational layer of ancient secrecy sets the stage perfectly for our first revealed alliance, a desperate pact forged in the shadow of a rising empire. One such hidden understanding emerged from the dust of a great and indecisive battle. The Hittite and Egyptian empires had clashed in a monumental struggle at Kadesh, a conflict so vast it strained both kingdoms to their limits. Yet the official records of glorious victory belied a quiet, practical truth. Both powers were exhausted, their treasuries drained, and their armies bled white. In the aftermath, away from the grand monuments and celebratory inscriptions, their diplomats began a far more delicate dance. The result was a secret pact, a treaty of silver and strategy that would realign the ancient world. This was not a simple peace accord announced to the populace. It was a clandestine agreement for mutual defense and divided influence, a masterful act of realpolitik designed to secure their flanks against a common, rising threat. The Assyrians to the east were growing in power and ambition, and both the Hittites and Egyptians recognized that continued war between themselves would only make them vulnerable. So they chose a hidden partnership over public enmity. To cement this fragile peace, they employed the oldest and most personal tool of statecraft, a royal marriage. A Hittite princess journeyed to Egypt to become a wife of Pharaoh Ramesses II. This was no mere romantic union, it was the living, breathing symbol of the treaty, a human bond to guarantee the promises made on clay tablets. The public likely saw a political marriage, a trophy from a rival kingdom, but in reality she was the key to a secret alliance. The treaty secretly carved up the Levant, that vital corridor of trade and conflict. Each empire agreed to respect the other's sphere of influence, allowing them to withdraw their overextended forces and project strength toward other, more pressing frontiers. This hidden détente created a stable, if unspoken, balance of power. For years, it prevented a wider, more devastating war that would have consumed the entire region. The peace that followed allowed for an unprecedented flow of goods and ideas between the two civilizations, from Egyptian gold to Hittite iron, all under the cover of a managed rivalry. The map of the Near East was quietly, yet permanently, stabilized not by a decisive victory on the battlefield, but by a shrewd, secret understanding between former enemies. This surprising cooperation proved that even the fiercest rivals could find common cause in the shadows, a lesson that would not be lost on other powers watching from the sidelines. Far to the east, along the fertile banks of the Yellow River, a conspiracy of whispers began to unravel a Bronze Age giant. The Shang dynasty stood as the undisputed master of its world, its power projected through towering bronze ritual vessels and a formidable army. Yet beneath this imposing surface, the nascent Zhou state was weaving a far more dangerous weapon than any spear or chariot, a web of secret allegiances stretched taut within the very heart of the Shang court. The Zhou leaders did not confront the Shang head-on. Instead, they masterfully cultivated the discontent that festered among the Shang's own nobles and military commanders. Through covert messengers and hidden meetings, they offered irresistible promises, vast tracts of land, prestigious new titles, and most compellingly, a share in a new moral order that would replace the Shang king's perceived decadence. This was not merely a rebellion, it was a silent corporate takeover of an entire civilization, a fifth column built with promises instead of swords. When the final confrontation came at the Battle of Mui, the true victory was not won on the field. The Zhou forces, though determined, were significantly outnumbered. Their real advantage arrived when entire divisions of the Shang army, their commanders already pledged in secret to the Zhou cause, turned their weapons against their own king. The seemingly invincible Shang dynasty collapsed from within, felled by the very hands it trusted to defend it. In the aftermath, the Zhou needed a public story, a grand narrative to justify their sudden ascent to power. Thus, they proclaimed the mandate of heaven, a philosophical concept stating that the gods withdrew their favor from unjust rulers and bestowed it upon the virtuous. This became the official, glorious reason for their success. But in reality, the mandate of heaven was in part a brilliant piece of political theater, a public justification for a victory that had been secured through private, clandestine deals that quietly redistributed power and land among the conspirators. This alliance demonstrates with stunning clarity that the most effective way to topple a giant is not always with a larger army, but by convincing the giant's own limbs to stop working. The fall of one dynasty and the rise of another was orchestrated not in battle cries, but in carefully chosen whispers, a pattern of internal subversion that would be studied and repeated for millennia to come. This quiet coup in China established a template for how to wield influence from the shadows, a lesson that would soon find a powerful echo in the distant world of the Mediterranean. Across the Mediterranean, a different kind of power was being assembled not with armies but with ships and shared secrets. The great Phoenician cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos appeared to the outside world as fierce rivals, each vying for dominance over lucrative trade routes. But this public competition was a carefully maintained illusion. Behind the scenes, the merchant princes of these ports had forged a silent maritime pact, an economic alliance that would grant them a virtual monopoly over the ancient seas. They understood that united, they could control everything, while divided, they might lose it all. So they chose coordination over conflict, hiding their cooperation in plain sight. This was not a formal treaty etched in stone, but a practical understanding built on mutual profit and unparalleled seafaring skill. They collectively guarded the secrets of navigation, like the paths of the stars and the hidden currents that led to distant, resource-rich shores. They shared charts of treacherous coastlines and established a network of clandestine colonies, tiny way stations dotting the Mediterranean and Atlantic coasts. These outposts, from Carthage in North Africa to Gadir in distant Spain, served as secure ports, supply depots, and listening posts, all part of an integrated system designed to keep their competitors in the dark. This hidden collaboration allowed them to dominate trade in commodities that were essential to the ancient world. They controlled the supply of precious tin from the misty islands of Britain, a metal vital for making bronze. They held a monopoly on the production of vibrant purple dye, extracted from rare sea snails, a color so expensive it became synonymous with royalty itself. From the silver of Spain to the ivory of Africa, the flow of wealth was meticulously managed by this unseen cartel. By presenting a fragmented facade, they avoided provoking the collective wrath of larger land-based empires like Egypt or Assyria, who saw them as mere merchants, not a unified geopolitical threat. This long-term, secret strategy had a cultural impact far greater than any military conquest. Their shared alphabet, a simple and efficient writing system developed for keeping commercial records, spread along these protected trade routes. It was adopted and adapted by the Greeks, eventually becoming the foundation for our own Latin script. The economic map of the ancient world was fundamentally redrawn by this undeclared alliance. Their enduring success proves that the most formidable empire can sometimes be a silent one, built not on conquered territory, but on controlled commerce and closely held knowledge. This model of hidden confederation, so effective on the open water, would find a terrifying parallel in the vast, wind-swept grasslands of the steppes. While the Phoenicians mastered the silent sea, the open grasslands birthed a different kind of phantom power. The vast Eurasian steppe was a sea of grass, and its nomadic riders were the masters of its hidden currents. To the great settled empires of Persia and China, the sudden appearance of Scythian and Sarmatian hordes seemed like a force of nature, a random and chaotic tide of barbarian invasion. But this was a dangerous illusion. These were not disorganized bands, they were the result of fluid, secret confederations, temporary alliances of convenience forged between powerful tribal clans. Bound by solemn oaths sworn to their warrior gods and a shared, desperate need for new pasturellands or plunder, they could coalesce into a massive, coordinated force with startling speed. Their movements were not random, they were carefully planned military operations, executed with a precision that belied their stateless society. The secret to this astonishing coordination lay in a shared, unwritten code of conduct that governed life on the steppe and a legendary network of scouts and messengers. These riders could carry strategic information across thousands of miles with an efficiency that the cumbersome imperial armies could only dream of, moving from clan to clan without ever needing a central capital or a permanent king. A message could travel from the borders of China to the edge of Europe faster than any single horse or man, relayed through this hidden communication web. When such a confederation moved, it did not just raid a village, it could permanently redirect the flow of entire trade routes, cutting off empires from vital resources like Siberian gold or Central Asian horses. Smaller border kingdoms caught in their path could be utterly erased from the map, not by a declared war, but by a single, overwhelming season of coordinated migration and conquest. The silent, shifting agreements between steppe chieftains repeatedly forced giants like Persia to rebuild their frontier walls and China to reconsider its entire northern defense strategy, pouring vast resources into monumental projects like the early Great Wall. This proved a profound truth that the most formidable military threat could be an alliance with no fixed address, a phantom enemy whose power was written in dust and hoofprints, not on parchment or stone. This decentralized model of power, so effective on the open plains, would soon inspire a new kind of strategic thinking within the very empires the nomads threatened. Even the most formidable empires knew the power of a plausible lie. The sprawling Achaemenid Persian Empire, a colossus that stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, possessed vast armies of every description. Yet in its relentless campaigns to subdue Egypt and secure its restless frontiers, it faced a very specific military problem. Persian forces were masters of cavalry and archery, but they often struggled against the heavily armored, disciplined infantry phalanxes fielded by the Greek city-states. The solution was not to reform their entire army, but to secretly rent one. A quiet, lucrative pipeline opened, funneling thousands of Greek hoplite mercenaries into the heart of the Persian war machine. These were not official allies. They were often soldiers from city-states like Sparta or Athens, poleis that were publicly and sometimes violently opposed to Persian influence. For the Greek city-states, this was a perfect arrangement. Sending away restless, politically troublesome veterans and unemployed soldiers stabilized their own internal politics. In return, a steady stream of Persian gold-silver flowed back, enriching the city-state coffers without any public accountability. It was a clandestine military-industrial complex, centuries before the term existed. The mercenaries themselves became a shadow army, a deniable instrument of Persian power. They would fight in the deserts of Egypt or on the shores of the Aegean, their iconic bronze armor and long spears deciding battles in Persia's favor, all while their home cities officially condemned Persian aggression. This created a bizarre and deeply ironic situation where Greek soldiers were effectively fighting other Greeks in the service of a foreign emperor, their true allegiance hidden behind a veil of personal profit and political exile. This secret accord did more than just win battles. It wove a web of Greek influence deep within the Persian court. These mercenary commanders, like the famous Athenian general Themistocles who later defected, became advisors and power brokers. They brought with them an intimate knowledge of Greek tactics, politics, and weaknesses, intelligence that the Persians eagerly consumed. This very network, however, would become a fatal flaw. Decades later, when Alexander the Great launched his invasion, he exploited these pre-existing connections. He knew which Persian satraps were familiar with Greek ways, which could be bribed, and which commands were held by Greek mercenary captains who might be persuaded to switch sides. The map of the empire was altered not just by the spears of Alexander's companions, but by the secret pathways of influence and betrayal laid down by decades of clandestine recruitment. This practice reveals a timeless truth of geopolitics, that the most decisive wars are sometimes fought by proxy, with soldiers whose loyalty is for sale, and whose victories are claimed by a power that never officially sent them. This reliance on hidden armies shows a sophisticated, almost modern, understanding of warfare, where influence could be projected and borders redrawn without ever declaring open hostilities. Even the mightiest fortress can be brought down by a crack from within. In the sprawling lands of the Indian subcontinent, the powerful Nanda Empire seemed unshakable, its treasury overflowing and its armies vast. But its downfall was being engineered not by a rival king, but by a scholar and his protege operating from the shadows. The strategist Chanakya and the young Chandragupta Maurya understood that a direct assault on the Nanda would be suicidal. So they waged a different kind of war, one fought with whispers and gold instead of swords and elephants. They built a vast, clandestine intelligence network, a secret alliance of spies that infiltrated the very heart of the Nanda administration. This was the true foundation of the Mauryan Empire. Their agents were everywhere, from the royal court to the military barracks, and even among the merchant guilds. They were not just gathering information, they were actively shaping the reality of the empire. They identified officials who were greedy, ambitious, or disgruntled, and systematically corrupted them with promises of greater wealth and status in the new regime. They spread carefully crafted rumors to turn the populace and the nobility against the Nanda king, painting him as unjust and weak. This covert campaign was a masterclass in psychological warfare, eroding the legitimacy of the ruler long before a single arrow was fired. The network provided Chandragupta with something more valuable than soldiers: perfect intelligence. They knew the exact locations of the Nanda army garrisons, the schedules of their patrols, and the moods of their commanders. When the final military push came, Chandragupta's forces moved with stunning precision, striking at weak points and bypassing strongholds, their every move informed by the secret reports flowing from within the enemy's camp. The public saw a swift military conquest, but the real victory had already been won in the hidden corridors of power. The Mauryan Empire, which would become India's first great imperial power, was born from this web of deceit and insight. It stands as a powerful testament to a timeless principle that an empire can be built with information and subversion, making the eventual clash of armies little more than a formality. This model of winning the secret war before the public one would echo through the ages, a dark art of statecraft that traveled far beyond India's borders. A broken promise can sometimes build an empire. In the fractured landscape of the Warring States period, 7 major kingdoms vied for ultimate control, their borders a constantly shifting puzzle of war and diplomacy. The Qin state, ambitious and ruthless, understood that a direct assault on its powerful neighbor Zhou would be a costly and uncertain gamble. So they devised a plan of breathtaking deception, targeting not Zhou itself, but its potential ally, the state of Wei. The foundation of their strategy was a secret pact, a whispered agreement offered to the rulers of Wei. The terms seemed irresistible. Qin promised Wei significant territorial rewards, rich lands to be carved from a defeated Zhou, if only Wei would stand aside and remain neutral during the coming conflict. It was a lie, a complete fabrication designed to paralyze a rival. Wei, lured by the prospect of easy gains and fearing the might of Qin, accepted the offer. They believed they were playing a clever game, benefiting from a war without risking their own soldiers. This was the Qin-Wei strategic deception in action. When Qin launched its full military might against the kingdom of Zhou, the crucial moment arrived. Zhou, expecting support from its neighbor Wei, found itself completely isolated. No reinforcements came. The Wei army stayed firmly within their borders, watching and waiting for the promised reward that would never materialize. The Qin forces, free from the threat of a second front, crushed the Zhou military in a decisive victory. The map of China shuddered and changed. Qin absorbed vast new territories, its power and resources swelling enormously. Wei was left with nothing but the bitter realization of its own gullibility. They had traded a strategic partnership for an empty promise, and in doing so, they had empowered the very state that would eventually consume them all. This single, dishonest alliance was not merely a battle won, It was a masterstroke that fundamentally altered the balance of power. It demonstrated with cold precision that the most effective weapon in a ruler's arsenal could be a cleverly told lie delivered in secret. The path to a unified China was paved with such broken promises, each one a quiet, calculated step toward an imperial destiny. This ancient lesson in realpolitik, where truth is disposable and outcomes are everything, would find a chilling parallel in the sun-drenched deserts of another continent, where a hidden pact would determine the fate of an entire religion. Silver was the lifeblood of ancient empires, and its source was a closely guarded secret. While Carthage appeared to the world as the successor to the Phoenician trade network, its true power stemmed from a series of clandestine pacts far to the west, in the mineral-rich land of Iberia. The city's agents moved inland, bypassing the established Greek and Phoenician coastal trading posts to negotiate directly with powerful local chieftains. The agreements they forged were not public treaties, but private understandings sealed with gifts of fine wine, ornate weapons, and promises of unwavering military support against rival tribes. In return, Carthage demanded and received exclusive rights to the territory's most precious resource, the seemingly endless veins of silver that ran beneath the mountains. This was a masterstroke of covert economic strategy. By dealing directly with the source, Carthage cut out the middlemen and created a private, vertical monopoly. They established fortified ports like Carthago-Nova, New Carthage, not as open trading hubs, but as heavily guarded transfer points where raw silver was smelted into ingots and shipped directly to the Carthaginian treasury under armed guard. The sheer scale of this hidden wealth was staggering. The silver flowing from these secret mines financed the entire Carthaginian state, paying for its powerful navy, its professional army of mercenaries, and most famously, the legendary campaigns of Hannibal Barca. Every soldier in his army, every elephant on his march toward Rome, was ultimately funded by the quiet, exclusive deals struck with Iberian chieftains years before. This hidden empire of money made Carthage a superpower, yet its foundation was invisible to its greatest rival. Rome saw a maritime competitor, but it was slow to understand that it was really facing a shadowy, resource-based confederation whose heart beat in the distant Spanish hills. The rise of Carthage proves that the most formidable armies march on a road paved with secret silver, a lesson that would not be lost on the Romans as they sought their own path to dominance. A clash of empires seemed inevitable. In the turbulent aftermath of Alexander the Great's death, his vast empire shattered into warring fragments, each controlled by one of his ambitious generals. Seleucus I Nicator had carved out a significant kingdom, but he faced threats on all sides, especially from his fellow Macedonian rivals in the west. To his east, however, a new and formidable power was rising, the Mauryan Empire under its shrewd and expansionist emperor, Chandragupta. The logical outcome was a colossal war, a clash between the heirs of Greece and the new masters of India. But logic was set aside for a far more pragmatic solution. A secret understanding whispered between two rulers who recognized a greater opportunity. Instead of mobilizing their armies for a costly and uncertain conflict, Seleucus and Chandragupta engaged in a stunning act of geopolitical horse trading. Seleucus quietly ceded control of vast, wealthy territories in the Indus Valley, a region he could ill afford to defend. In return, he received a gift of immense strategic value, 500 Indian war elephants. This was not a simple purchase, it was the cornerstone of a clandestine non-aggression pact. For Seleucus, this secret deal was a masterstroke. Those 500 elephants became the core of his military might in the west, a terrifying force he used to crush his Macedonian rivals and secure his own frontiers. He had traded distant, hard-to-govern land for an instant, invincible army that secured his immediate survival. For Chandragupta, the benefits were just as profound. He gained the lush and populous Indus Valley without a single battle, securing his northwestern frontier against any future Hellenistic incursions. More importantly, this treaty with a legitimate successor to Alexander granted his own Mauryan empire a priceless commodity: international legitimacy. He was no longer just a regional upstart, but an emperor recognized by the Hellenistic world. The public likely saw a territorial concession, but the reality was a mutually beneficial, secret alliance that averted a devastating war. This quiet bargain created one of the ancient world's most stable and peaceful borders. For nearly a century, this unspoken truce allowed for an unprecedented flow of ideas and goods. Greek art and coinage influenced Indian craftsmanship, while Indian philosophy, mathematics, and religious thought began their slow journey westward. The map was permanently altered not by a conqueror's sword, but by a pragmatic emperor's decision to trade land for pachyderms, proving that sometimes the most profound territorial changes come from a handshake deal made in the shadows. This model of strategic exchange, swapping land for security, would soon be mirrored in a very different part of the world, where another empire would make a similar calculation with a rising desert power. The Mediterranean's vital sea lanes were protected by a pact no one ever saw. While empires clashed on land, the Ptolemaic kings of Egypt and the merchant rulers of Rhodes forged a silent alliance at sea. This was not a formal treaty announced to the world, but a quiet, unwritten understanding built on mutual need and immense profit. Their shared enemy was chaos, the pirates and rival kingdoms like the Seleucids who threatened to strangle the trade routes that were their lifeblood. Rhodes possessed the sharpest naval sword in the Mediterranean, a fleet of advanced warships, and the most skilled sailors and naval architects of the age. They offered their expertise and their perfectly positioned port, a bustling crossroads of commerce. In return, Egypt provided the fuel for this enterprise, vast shipments of grain, and a seemingly endless supply of gold and silver from the Nile's bounty. More importantly, the Ptolemies offered political cover, using their immense diplomatic weight to shield Rhodian actions from scrutiny. This hidden compact created an unofficial but formidable maritime police force. Rhodian patrols swept the eastern seas clean of pirates, their actions seemingly independent but privately backed by Egyptian wealth. The safety they provided had ripple effects that reached far beyond their own harbors. One of the biggest beneficiaries was a rising power in the West that did not even know this alliance existed: the Roman Republic. As Rome grew, its population swelled, and it became increasingly dependent on imported grain to feed its people. A significant portion of that grain sailed through the very sea lanes that the Ptolemaic-Rhodian partnership kept secure. The bread in a Roman citizen's hand was there, in part, because of a secret naval agreement made between an Egyptian king and a merchant republic. This hidden cooperation fostered an era of remarkable economic stability. Trade flourished, insurance costs for cargo plummeted, and the entire region prospered under the invisible shield of this naval compact. It is a profound demonstration of how a quiet, pragmatic partnership between two very different powers could shape the destiny of a third, all without a single public declaration of friendship. The stability of the steppe was a carefully managed secret. For the Han Chinese watching from their fortified walls, the Xiongnu Confederacy appeared as a single, monstrous entity, a whirlwind of mounted warriors descending from the north with terrifying coordination. But this fearsome unity was an illusion, a masterpiece of political theater orchestrated through a web of clandestine internal pacts. The great Shan Yu, the supreme leader, did not rule by command alone. His true authority was woven from a series of secret oaths and binding agreements made with the powerful chieftains of dozens of disparate tribes. These were not public proclamations, but whispered deals struck in felt tents, sealed with cups of fermented mare's milk and sworn in the name of the eternal sky. The agreements were brutally practical. They meticulously distributed plunder from raids, ensuring that every clan, from the most powerful to the most minor, received a predetermined share of silk, grain, and captives. This prevented the internal feuds over spoils that could shatter their collective strength. More critically, these pacts defined exclusive raiding territories along the vast Han frontier. One chieftain was granted the right to harass a specific valley, while another was allotted a wealthy prefecture, a system that prevented their own forces from clashing with each other in a chaotic scramble for loot. The most vital of these secret arrangements governed the succession of the Shan Yu himself. To avoid a bloody civil war every time a leader died, the chieftains had a private understanding, a hidden order of succession that bypassed the ruler's sons in favor of the most competent brother or cousin. This clandestine system of inheritance was the Confederacy's keystone, the single most important factor that allowed it to present a unified, terrifying front to the Han Empire for generations. The entire edifice was cemented by the oldest tools of secret diplomacy, royal marriages that tied chieftains' families to the Shan Yu's lineage, and the exchange of sons as hostages, living guarantees of continued loyalty. The Confederacy's immense power was therefore a delicate balancing act. When these hidden agreements held, the Xiongnu were an unstoppable force of nature. But when a greedy chieftain felt his share was too small, or when the secret succession plan was challenged, the entire structure could collapse into internecine war overnight. The seemingly invincible steppe confederacy was, in the end, only as strong as the silence and trust between its conspirators. Its dramatic fractures revealed a profound truth to the watching Han strategists, that the most formidable enemy could be dismantled not by armies, but by exploiting the hidden tensions within its own secret alliances. Isolated at the edge of the known world, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom was a shimmering mirage of Greek culture surrounded by a sea of Central Asian steppe. Its survival depended on a secret it shared with the masters of the desert. The nomadic Umayyad Confederation held the keys to the world's wealth, controlling the mountain passes and oasis towns that formed the early Silk Road. A direct confrontation would have shattered the Greek kingdom, so its rulers chose a different path, forging a hidden, symbiotic pact with these powerful wanderers. In the quiet halls of the Greek palaces, agreements were made far from the public eye. The Greeks offered the Umayyad something they could not produce themselves, the refined technology of a settled civilization. This included advanced metalworking for superior weapons and armor, as well as luxurious finished goods like fine textiles and wine. In return, the Umayyad offered the one thing the Greeks desperately needed: safe passage. Every caravan laden with Chinese silk or Central Asian jade that rolled through the kingdom's markets did so under the unspoken protection of the nomads. This was more than just a trade agreement, it was an intelligence-sharing arrangement. The Umayyad, with their far-reaching contacts across the steppes, acted as the kingdom's eyes and ears, providing crucial warnings about shifting political alliances or approaching war bands. This secret partnership transformed the Greco-Bactrian kingdom into one of the ancient world's most astonishing cultural laboratories. The flow of silk westward was matched by a flow of Hellenistic art eastward. Greek artists in Bactria began sculpting statues of the Buddha, draping him in realistic, flowing Greek robes, creating a completely new artistic tradition that would eventually travel all the way to China and Japan. The philosophies of East and West mingled in its bustling cities, all because of a quiet understanding between two seemingly opposite worlds. This alliance proves that the most profound cultural revolutions can begin not with conquest, but with a clandestine handshake between a city and a tribe. Hatred for Rome became a currency more valuable than gold. While the Roman Republic expanded its reach, a shadow was growing in the east, a conspiracy woven in the royal court of Pontus by its cunning king, Mithridates VI. He understood that he could never defeat Rome in a straightforward war. His own army was formidable, but it was not enough. So he spent years building something far more dangerous, a hidden network of client kings, independent city-states, and ruthless pirate captains, all bound together by a shared and burning resentment of Roman greed and heavy-handed rule. This was not a public alliance, but a secret society of the aggrieved, its members connected by clandestine messengers and sworn oaths. Mithridates was the spider at the center of this vast, invisible web. He offered these lesser rulers what they craved most, a promise of restored autonomy and a share in the plunder of a fallen Roman system. To the pirate fleets, he offered safe harbors and legitimacy, turning their chaotic predation into a coordinated naval strategy. The true power of this hidden coalition was revealed in a single, horrifying event that stunned the Roman world. On a prearranged day, a coordinated command was sent out across Anatolia. In dozens of cities from Ephesus to Pergamon, the secret allies of Mithridates acted as one. In what became known as the Asiatic Vespers, tens of thousands of Roman citizens and Italian settlers were systematically massacred. It was not a spontaneous riot, but a chillingly efficient execution of a long-planned secret agreement. Rome was caught completely unaware. They had no intelligence of this decentralized alliance, no understanding that so many different peoples and powers had united under a single, hidden banner. The map of Anatolia seemed to flip overnight, with Roman influence erased and the authority of Mithridates stretching from the Black Sea to the Aegean coast. This event triggered a series of long and grueling wars known as the Mithridatic conflicts, which stretched Roman resources to their limit. Mithridates demonstrated a terrifying new form of warfare. His power did not reside in a single capital or a lone army, but in his ability to orchestrate a simultaneous uprising across a vast territory, proving that a secretly prepared coalition could strike a superpower at its weakest point, its assumption of control. The legacy of this hidden network is a stark warning about the power of coordinated resentment, a lesson that would not be lost on Rome as it hardened into an empire. A desperate rebellion needed more than courage to survive. While the Maccabean fighters rallied in the Judean hills, a small delegation traveled in secret on a far more critical mission. Their destination was not a battlefield but the political heart of a rising power, the Roman Senate. The Seleucid Empire that oppressed them was a giant, a Hellenistic successor state with vast resources. A direct public revolt was tantamount to suicide, so the Jewish rebels, led by Judas Maccabeus, engaged in a masterstroke of clandestine diplomacy. They sought not soldiers, but something even more valuable, the legitimizing stamp of recognition from a power that terrified the Seleucids. The treaty they secured was a formal pact of friendship and mutual support, a document that declared Rome and the Jewish people were allies. This was not a promise of immediate Roman legions marching to Judea. Its power was entirely psychological and political. For the Maccabees, this piece of parchment was a shield. They could now present themselves not as mere insurgents, but as the legitimate government of Judea, backed by the most formidable military reputation in the Mediterranean. The message to the Seleucid king was clear: if you crush this rebellion with your full force, you risk inviting the attention and wrath of Rome. This secret understanding forced the Seleucids to hesitate. They could never be sure if a punitive expedition into Judea might be seen in Rome as an attack on an ally. potentially opening a second catastrophic front. This hesitation gave the Maccabean fighters the breathing room they desperately needed to organize, train, and win a series of crucial battles. The success of the revolt and the eventual establishment of the independent Hasmonean dynasty was therefore underwritten by a long-distance bet, a secret alliance that leveraged a threat rather than a direct army. It was a brilliant gamble that a small nation's fight for freedom could be amplified by aligning with a distant, ascending empire. This hidden pact demonstrates that the most powerful weapon in a rebellion can sometimes be a single document, signed in secret, that makes a giant look over its shoulder. This clever use of diplomatic leverage raises a compelling question. What happens when an entire civilization, not just a rebel army, decides its survival depends on a secret kept from its own people? The Parthian cavalry seemed to materialize from the dust itself. Their legendary horse archers could unleash a storm of arrows while fading back into the landscape, a tactic that baffled and infuriated their Roman opponents. But this seemingly supernatural mobility had a very earthly secret. The Parthian Empire's military genius lay not just in training its own soldiers, but in a series of hidden agreements with the nomadic tribes of the Central Asian steppe. These were not public treaties but private, unwritten pacts sealed with gifts of silk and silver. In exchange for access to lush border pastures for their herds, the nomads provided the Parthians with a continuous supply of what was essentially military fuel, thousands of fresh, sturdy steppe horses. A single Parthian cataphract, a heavily armored lancer, required multiple mounts to remain effective on a long campaign. This secret supply chain, operating far from the eyes of imperial inspectors, is what gave the Parthian army its incredible stamina and range. More than just horse traders, these nomadic clans were silent partners in the Parthian war machine. They provided auxiliary light cavalry, scouts who knew every dune and wadi, and most importantly, a steady stream of intelligence. They were the eyes and ears on the frontier, reporting on the movements of rival powers like Rome to the west and the Kushan Empire to the east long before any official envoy could bring word. This hidden military-industrial complex reached its brutal perfection at the Battle of Carrhae. The Roman general Crassus led a massive legionary force into the desert, confident in his heavy infantry's ability to crush any enemy in a direct fight. But the Parthian general Shauna was fighting a different kind of war, one orchestrated through his silent nomadic allies. His army was supplied with an endless relay of fresh horses, allowing his horse archers to maintain a constant, withering barrage without tiring. The Roman shields became heavy with embedded arrows, their formations broke under the relentless harassment, and their cavalry was cut off and destroyed. The legions were methodically annihilated not by a grand army, but by a decentralized network of specialists bound by secret agreements. The Parthians had won the battle decades before by carefully cultivating the loyalty of the steppe. Their greatest victories were always secured in the quiet negotiations with tribal chieftains, long before the first arrow was ever knocked on a battlefield. The scent of frankincense was worth its weight in gold, and its journey was a carefully guarded secret. Far from the Mediterranean's bustling ports, two kingdoms forged a silent partnership that choked the world's supply of luxury. The African kingdom of Aksum, with its deep water ports, and the Arabian power of Himyar, perched at the mouth of the Red Sea, appeared to be rivals. In reality, their merchants were co-conspirators in a vast, clandestine cartel. They met in private to set the prices for the most sought-after commodities of the ancient world: African ivory, aromatic frankincense and myrrh, and exotic spices from the east. Their agreement was simple and devastatingly effective. They would fix the market and work in concert to block any Greek or Roman trading ship from sailing directly to the source in India. Any foreign merchant attempting to bypass their control would find no friendly ports, no willing pilots, and no goods to purchase. The entire flow of wealth from the Indian Ocean into the Mediterranean was funneled through this narrow, secret duopoly. The riches this generated were almost unimaginable. It was this hidden river of gold that financed the construction of Aksum's towering, mysterious stelae, those great stone obelisks that still puzzle archaeologists today. It built the magnificent dams and marble palaces of Himyar, transforming the arid Arabian landscape into a seat of immense power. In Rome, a senator paying a fortune for a piece of carved ivory tusk or a priest burning precious myrrh in a temple ritual had no idea their wealth was being quietly siphoned by a secret agreement made between two kings a world away. The economic map of the ancient world was subtly but permanently distorted by this invisible alliance. It proves that a monopoly held in silence can be more powerful than any army, reshaping distant economies from the shadows. This model of hidden economic control raises a fascinating question. How do you conquer an empire without a single declaration of war, using only the quiet power of commerce? A fractured people can forge an empire with a single decision. The Umayyad clans were scattered and humiliated, pushed from their ancestral lands in western China by rival nomads. They were leaderless, divided, and facing extinction on the harsh steppe. Their survival hinged on a clandestine gathering, a closed-door meeting of their most powerful chieftains where old rivalries were set aside for a desperate, shared goal. In that tense council, they made a secret pact that would change the map of Asia. They agreed to end their internal wars and unite their warriors, their herds, and their fortunes under a single, ambitious leader, a man named Goguryeo-Mohe. This was not a public declaration of a new nation. It was a private, blood-sworn pact to turn their collective strength outward, to conquer or die. This secret unity was their ultimate weapon. By pooling their resources, they transformed from a collection of quarreling tribes into a focused military machine. Their first target was the crumbling Greco-Bactrian kingdom, those fading remnants of Alexander's legacy that held the wealthy cities of Central Asia. The Greeks, accustomed to dealing with divided nomads, were completely unprepared for this new, unified force. The Kushan armies, forged in that secret agreement, swept down and carved out a kingdom of their own almost overnight. The public saw the sudden rise of the Kushan Empire, a majestic power that would dominate the Silk Road for centuries. But its birth certificate was not a grand proclamation. It was that whispered pact between chieftains in a felt tent. From that single act of clandestine cooperation, an empire was born that would become the world's central crossroads, where Buddhist missionaries met Greek philosophers and Chinese silk was traded for Roman gold. Even the most bitter enemies sometimes need to whisper. While the legions of Rome and the horse archers of Parthia presented a public face of relentless hostility, a different, quieter war was being waged in the back alleys of border towns and the crowded markets of Antioch and Ctesiphon. This was the war of the shadow diplomats, a clandestine network of spies who operated under the perfect cover of merchants, physicians, and traveling scholars. They were the architects of an unspoken agreement, a secret channel of communication that served as a safety valve for two empires perpetually on the brink of total war. Their mission was not to destroy the enemy, but to carefully manage the conflict. Through these hidden messengers, Rome and Parthia negotiated the delicate return of high-value prisoners, captured generals, or even disgraced royalty. A Roman nobleman could be quietly ransomed for a chest of gold, his public humiliation erased from the official records. More importantly, these backchannels were used to set the invisible rules of their endless proxy wars. They would establish unmarked boundaries in their support for client kings in Armenia, ensuring their indirect battles did not accidentally spiral into a direct, catastrophic confrontation between the two superpowers. The most surprising function of this secret dialogue was the sharing of intelligence on common threats. When nomadic hordes from the northern steppes began massing for a raid, a Parthian agent might discreetly pass a warning to his Roman contact. It was a pragmatic calculation, a shared understanding that a rampaging barbarian army was a danger to both their frontiers. This hidden cooperation created a fragile yet essential stability. It was a Cold War managed with quiet conversations, a system where both empires recognized that some level of secret cooperation was the price of their own survival. This unspoken arrangement begs a deeper question: how many wars were prevented not by public treaties, but by a single, anonymous message passed between two spies in a dusty marketplace? A kingdom's destiny was altered by a series of quiet deals with its neighbors. On the Korean peninsula, the powerful kingdoms of Byzantine and Goguryeo saw the smaller Silla as a junior partner at best, or a future vassal at worst. What they failed to see was the subtle political web Silla was weaving to its south, a web designed to ensnare the vibrant and technologically gifted Gaya Confederacy. Gaya was not a single kingdom, but a league of city-states renowned for its master ironworkers and its extensive maritime trade routes that connected the peninsula to Japan and beyond. A direct military conquest would have been bloody, costly, and would have alerted Silla's larger rivals, so Silla chose a different path, one of stealth and persuasion. They initiated a campaign of covert political agreements, targeting the aristocratic families who held real power within the Gaya cities. Secret envoys carried promises of high-ranking positions within a unified Silla court, guarantees of preserved local authority, and most effectively, proposals of royal marriage. Silla princes and princesses were wed to Gaya nobles, weaving the bloodlines of the two powers together and creating a network of kinship loyalty that slowly superseded old political allegiances. This was a silent, bloodless annexation. One by one, the Gaya city-states were politically absorbed, their formidable iron production and their bustling ports falling under Silla's control without a single major recorded war. The public saw a gradual consolidation, but the reality was a meticulously executed merger. The benefits for Silla were transformative. Suddenly, they possessed the finest steel on the peninsula, allowing them to equip their soldiers with superior weapons and armor. Their new access to the southern seas flooded their treasury with wealth from trade, funding the expansion of their army and the fortification of their borders. When Silla finally turned its full attention to its ancient rivals, Byzantine and Goguryeo, it was no longer the weaker kingdom they remembered. It was a powerhouse fortified with Gaya's technology and wealth, a unified force that had been assembled in the shadows. The eventual unification of the Korean peninsula under Silla began not with a famous battle, but with these whispered promises and arranged marriages, a hidden fusion that reshaped the region's political and technological landscape for centuries. A royal marriage can be a slow-acting poison for a kingdom. In the lush river deltas of Southeast Asia, the powerful maritime kingdom of Funan appeared to hold all the cards, with its wealthy port cities and its sophisticated network of trade reaching all the way to Rome. Its vassal state, Chenla, inland and up the Mekong River, seemed subordinate and contained, but the true current of power was flowing in the opposite direction, guided by a secret river of bloodlines. The ruling families of Funan and Chenla engaged in a deliberate, multi-generational strategy of dynastic integration. A Funan princess would be wed to a Chenla prince, their child raised in the inland court, steeped in Chenla's ambitions. This was not a single political marriage, but a series of them, a clandestine program of succession planning orchestrated by the elites of both kingdoms. Publicly, these unions celebrated unity and reinforced Funan's dominance. Privately, they were a calculated transfer of legitimacy, slowly funneling the royal blood and sacred authority of the coastal kingdom into the hands of its inland vassal. The final steps of this quiet takeover were sealed with secret political oaths, sworn in hidden ceremonies away from the public eye. Key Funan nobles and priests pledged their loyalty to the rising Chenla dynasty, guaranteed positions of power in the new order in exchange for their cooperation. This ensured that when the transition of power finally occurred, it was astonishingly smooth. There was no great rebellion, no sack of cities, no recorded war of conquest. The kingdom of Chenla simply absorbed the institutions, the administrative systems, and the entire territory of Funan, as if it were a natural inheritance. The map of Southeast Asia evolved through this meticulously planned succession. The center of gravity for the region's civilization shifted decisively from the coast to the interior, a move that would define Cambodian history for centuries to come. This hidden integration created the fertile ground from which the magnificent Khmer culture and the future Angkorian Empire would eventually spring. The rise of a great civilization was not born from the chaos of war, but from the silent, patient work of dynastic weavers who stitched two worlds together with threads of matrimony and secret promises. This peaceful consolidation of power stands in stark contrast to the methods of another empire, one that would use a very different kind of secret to bind its vast and restless domains together. The battlefield between empires can be a chapel as much as a fortress. While the armies of Sasanian Persia and the Byzantine Empire clashed openly along their fortified frontiers, a far more subtle conflict raged in the shadows of their cathedrals. These two superpowers, locked in a perpetual struggle for supremacy, discovered a devastating new weapon, the manipulation of religious faith. They engaged in a clandestine war of ecclesiastical manipulation, secretly funding and encouraging theological minorities within each other's borders to foment internal dissent and instability. The Sasanians, though primarily Zoroastrian, found it strategically useful to offer quiet support to the Monophysite Christians within the Byzantine Empire. The Monophysites held a belief about the nature of Christ that was condemned as heresy by the official Orthodox Church in Constantinople. This theological difference was not merely a matter of doctrine, it was a potent political fault line. By subtly supporting these dissident groups, Sasanian agents could amplify internal Byzantine conflicts, turning citizens against their own emperor and diverting imperial resources away from the military frontier to deal with religious riots and schisms. It was a brilliant strategy of ideological subversion, weakening the giant from within by exploiting its own spiritual divisions. The Byzantines, for their part, were quick to retaliate in kind. They directed their own clandestine efforts toward the Nestorian Christians living within the Sasanian Empire. The Nestorians, another group with beliefs deemed unorthodox by other Christian sects, had found a degree of tolerance under Sasanian rule, often because they were seen as politically separate from the Byzantine enemy. Byzantine spies and diplomats worked secretly to change that perception, encouraging Nestorian leaders to assert greater autonomy and perhaps even rebel, thereby creating a fifth column of discontent that could split the Sasanian king's attention during a crucial military campaign. This shadow war demonstrated a chillingly modern understanding of power. The most secure border wall is useless if the people living behind it are turned against one another. These empires were not just fighting over land, they were fighting for the very loyalty of each other's populations, using faith as a lever to pry apart the foundations of their rival state. The map of influence was being redrawn not by siege engines, but by whispered promises to bishops and carefully smuggled letters of support. This quiet, relentless pressure ensured that the conflict was never confined to the battlefield. but seeped into the very soul of each empire, proving that the most dangerous frontiers are often those that divide a people's beliefs. The most enduring empires are built not just on conquest but on shared dreams. At the height of its golden age, the Gupta Empire of India forged a remarkable hidden alliance, not with a military rival, but with the serene Licchavi kingdom nestled in the high Himalayas of Nepal. This was the Gupta-Licchavi cultural compact, a secret pact of soft power that deliberately avoided the language of force. Instead of demanding tribute or soldiers, the Gupta court and the Licchavi rulers agreed to promote a unified vision of enlightened kingship, one that beautifully wove together the threads of Hindu and Buddhist tradition. This was a collaboration of aesthetics and ideology, a quiet agreement to build a cultural sphere that would bind their fates far more effectively than any temporary military victory. The compact functioned as a clandestine exchange of the most sophisticated tools of civilization. Gupta artists, architects, and religious scholars traveled north along hidden mountain paths, not as conquerors, but as invited guests and advisors. They brought with them the blueprint for a new kind of sacred space, the distinct Gupta style of temple architecture characterized by its elegant, towering shikara spires. In the Kathmandu Valley, these designs were adapted and built, forever changing the skyline of the Himalayas and creating a permanent architectural echo of the Gupta world. Sculptors began to carve deities and Buddhas with the unmistakable Gupta hallmark of serene beauty and fluid, graceful lines, a style that would define Nepalese art for 1,000 years. The true genius of this hidden alliance was its focus on the very concept of a ruler. The Guptas and the Licchavis jointly cultivated an ideal of the Chakravartin, the universal monarch who ruled through piety and wisdom, supporting both Hindu and Buddhist institutions. This shared political theology gave the Licchavi kings a profound source of legitimacy, aligning their rule with the most advanced imperial model of the age. In return, the Guptas gained something priceless, a loyal cultural satellite that willingly amplified their influence deep into Central Asia, along the vital trade routes that skirted the mountains. The artistic and religious map of South Asia was silently redrawn by this partnership. Long after the Gupta Empire itself had faded into history, its cultural DNA continued to thrive in the monasteries and temples of Nepal. This alliance stands as a powerful testament to a different kind of power. It proves that the most lasting changes to a civilization's map are often made with the chisel and the prayer wheel, not the sword and the spear, a lesson in the quiet, enduring strength of a shared cultural vision. The Sasanian Empire never saw the storm gathering on its eastern frontier. It believed the Kidarite Kushans were a broken force, their power shattered by previous wars. But in the shadows, the Kidarite chieftains had forged a desperate, secret pact with a new and terrifying power, the Hephthalite nomads. This was not a formal alliance of kings, but a clandestine conspiracy of the displaced, a hidden agreement to share intelligence, warriors, and a single, burning goal, to plunder the richest empire on earth. The Kidarites, who knew the intricate defenses of the Sasanian borderlands intimately, provided the maps and the guidance. The Hephthalites, a whirlwind of fresh, ruthless cavalry, supplied the overwhelming force. Their coordination was a masterpiece of stealth. While Sasanian spies watched the main Hephthalite horde, smaller, pre-arranged Kidarite war bands launched diversionary raids, drawing Persian garrisons out of position. Then the full might of the Hephthalites would strike the weakened point, a hammer against an anvil they had secretly placed. This hidden cooperation completely overwhelmed the Persian defense system, which was designed to repel a single enemy, not a synchronized attack from two. The result was a military catastrophe for the Sasanians. Their eastern armies were encircled and annihilated. The the Hephthalite and Kidarite forces then drove deep into the empire's heart, achieving the unthinkable, the capture of the magnificent capital, Ctesiphon. The Sasanian king himself was captured and subjected to a profound humiliation, forced to kneel before the Hephthalite chieftain as a subject. The public saw a sudden, inexplicable barbarian victory. The reality was a devastatingly effective secret pact, a lesson that a superpower's greatest vulnerability is often its ignorance of the quiet deals made between its enemies. This humiliation on the eastern frontier would force the Sasanian Empire to look desperately for new ways to secure its power, turning its gaze toward an ancient rival and a very different kind of hidden arrangement. A kingdom's most vital border guard was not a stone wall, but a web of trust woven in the northern wilderness. Goguryeo, the mighty Korean kingdom perched on the edge of the Chinese world, faced an existential threat from the colossal armies of the Sui and Tang dynasties. Its survival depended on a series of secret treaties, whispered agreements made not with other kings, but with the fierce Mo tribal chieftains of the Manchurian forests. These pacts turned a lawless frontier into a strategic shield, a hidden layer of defense that official histories barely acknowledged. The arrangement was brutally practical. The Mo clans, masters of the unforgiving terrain, became Goguryeo's eyes and ears. Their scouts, invisible among the pines and river valleys, provided the earliest possible warning of any Chinese military movement north of the Great Wall. Long before the imperial banners appeared on the horizon, Goguryeo's generals knew the size of the enemy force, its route, and even the state of its supplies. But the Mo were more than just sentinels, they were guerrillas. When a Chinese army finally marched, its long, vulnerable supply columns would be harried by sudden, vicious attacks from the forest. Wagons were burned, supply depots raided, and key scouts would vanish, their throats cut silently in the night. The Chinese commanders experienced a ghost war, a constant, draining attrition that sapped their morale and stretched their logistics to the breaking point long before they ever faced the main Goguryeo army in its mountain fortresses. In exchange for this indispensable service, the Mo received what they valued most. Goguryeo granted them exclusive trade privileges, allowing their furs, ginseng, and hunting hawks to flow into wealthy Korean markets for premium prices. More importantly, Goguryeo provided the tribes with something even more precious: military support. When rival Mo clans or other steppe peoples threatened a chieftain who was loyal to the secret pact, Goguryeo would dispatch its own elite border troops to tip the scale, securing the power of their allied chieftain and ensuring his continued loyalty. This hidden symbiosis was Goguryeo's masterstroke. It meant that when the empire of the Sui launched its enormous million-man invasions, or when the brilliant Tang dynasty sent its best generals, Goguryeo never had to fight a war on two fronts. Their northern border was secure, guarded by an invisible army of allies who had their own reasons to fear Chinese expansion. The stability of one of Asia's most resilient kingdoms relied entirely on the loyalty of these secret partners in the wild, a lesson in how the most formidable fortress can be a network of friendships instead of a line of stone. High on the roof of the world, a new kind of storm was gathering. For centuries, the fierce Tibetan tribes had turned their weapons on each other, their rivalries confining their power to the high valleys. But a single clan, the Yarlung, began to weave a different future in secret. Through clandestine meetings held far from prying eyes, their chieftains forged a series of binding pacts with their most formidable rivals. These were not public declarations of unity, but private, blood-sworn oaths, sealed with the oldest tools of statecraft, strategic marriages, and exchanges of royal hostages. The agreements were brutally practical. They promised an equal share of the vast plunder that lay beyond their mountains, in the wealthy civilizations of China and Central Asia. This redirection of ambition was the masterstroke. The intertribal warfare that had consumed them for generations was quietly set aside. Their collective martial energy now focused outward with terrifying precision. The man who would become the symbol of this newfound unity was Songtsen Gampo. He was less a conqueror and more the brilliant executor of a secret plan that had been laid years before his rise. The scattered Tibetan people, united by these hidden agreements, coalesced almost overnight into the formidable Tibetan Empire. This new power, born from clandestine diplomacy, immediately began to reshape the political map of Asia. It projected its strength northward, challenging the Tang dynasty of China in a series of brutal wars over the Silk Road oases. It pushed westward, confronting the expanding Abbasid Caliphate and competing for influence over the Pamir Mountains. The world suddenly had to account for a major new imperial player, one that had been assembled not in the light of day, but in the shadows of the highest peaks. How quickly can a fractured people become an empire when they decide to point all their spears in the same direction? A conquest can move at the speed of a promise. As the armies of the Umayyad Caliphate swept across North Africa, they faced a landscape not of empty deserts, but of fiercely independent Berber tribes, each a power in its own right. A campaign of pure subjugation would have taken generations and bled the caliphate dry, so the Umayyad commanders chose a different path, one hidden from the official chronicles. They initiated a secret policy of adoption, forging clandestine pacts with Berber chieftains that offered them not just a share of the plunder, but something far more valuable, a place of honor within the Islamic fold. These were not public treaties of surrender, but private agreements sworn in tents, granting Berber leaders prestigious titles and integrating their warriors as full partners in the army. The Berbers were not treated as a conquered people, but as brothers in faith and equals in battle. This hidden policy of inclusion was a political masterstroke. It transformed potential enemies into the caliphate's most motivated and effective vanguard. Berber cavalry, masters of the local terrain, became the spearhead of the advancing armies. Their knowledge of the land and their fierce fighting spirit now turned in favor of the caliphate, not against it. The map of the Maghreb was redrawn with astonishing speed because the Umayyads were not just conquering territory, they were quietly co-opting the very soul of its resistance. This secret network of partnerships reached its ultimate expression in the campaign to cross into Iberia. The General Tariq ibn Ziyad, who led that fateful expedition, was himself a Berber, a living symbol of this covert integration. His army, which landed at the rock that would bear his name, Gibraltar, was overwhelmingly composed of these adopted Berber warriors, fighting not under duress but with the fervor of those who had a genuine stake in the new order. The rapid collapse of the Visigothic kingdom in Spain was made possible not by the strength of Damascus, but by the quiet, strategic alliances forged in the North African dust. A superpower had learned that the fastest way to conquer a continent is to secretly make its people your own. A dynasty's golden age was guarded by its most unorthodox soldiers. The Tang emperors, presiding over one of the most brilliant and cosmopolitan eras in Chinese history, faced a perpetual strategic dilemma. Their vast empire was connected by the fragile, vital thread of the Silk Road, a network of trade routes perpetually threatened by the very steppe nomads whose cousins they needed to employ. The official Confucian bureaucracy prized order and cultural purity, viewing the nomadic tribes beyond the Great Wall as barbarians to be kept at bay. Yet the pragmatic military reality demanded a different solution, one that had to be crafted in the shadows. The Tang court secretly initiated a series of Hekin agreements, a term that literally means peace through kinship, but in practice functioned as a clandestine military recruitment policy. They offered entire tribes of Turkic horsemen a simple, powerful bargain. In exchange for their loyalty as frontier guards and elite shock troops, these nomadic warriors would receive fertile grazing lands along the border and a significant degree of autonomy to govern their own affairs. This was a hidden army paid for not with silver from the imperial treasury but with territory and freedom. The arrangement had to be kept deliberately quiet. To publicly admit that the empire's security relied on barbarian horsemen would have been a profound embarrassment to the Confucian scholars who administered the state. It would shatter the carefully cultivated image of the Son of Heaven, who was supposed to command the allegiance of all under heaven through moral virtue alone. So these Turkic tribes became the empire's open secret, a deniable instrument of power stationed at the edges of the civilized world. Their value was immeasurable. They fought the way they lived with breathtaking mobility and ferocity. When new waves of nomads threatened the caravan routes, it was these integrated Turkic auxiliaries who rode out to meet them, understanding the tactics and mentality of their foes in a way that a conscripted Chinese infantryman never could. They were the perfect counter-insurgency force, securing the mountains and deserts that were their natural home. The direct result of this secret compact was the legendary safety and prosperity of the Silk Road during the Tang era. The caravans laden with silk, spices, and jade moved under the invisible protection of these very horsemen. The bustling markets of Chang'an, filled with Persian merchants and Buddhist monks, owed their existence to the security provided by a military partnership the city's elite rarely acknowledged. This was the hidden engine of the Golden Age, a quiet agreement that the most effective way to control the steppe was to quietly hire the steppe itself. The cultural flourishing of the Tang dynasty, its poetry and its art, was ultimately underwritten by the loyalty of nomadic chieftains who had been promised a place within the empire's walls. History's grand stage of kings and conquests was only half the story. Beneath the surface, a different kind of power was constantly at work, weaving a hidden architecture that truly shaped the ancient world. These 27 secret alliances reveal that the most enduring changes to our map were often decided not in the thunder of battle, but in the quiet hum of diplomacy. A clandestine agreement for mutual defense could create a stable border that lasted for generations, while a public war might only shift a frontier temporarily. The fall of a dynasty was frequently the final, public act of a long and silent campaign of espionage and subversion, where key officials were turned and armies were betrayed from within long before the first siege engine was built. Economic collusion between merchant republics or resource cartels could redirect the flow of wealth across continents, financing empires and determining which kingdoms would rise and which would fade. Even the most profound cultural revolutions, the blending of artistic styles and religious ideas, were often facilitated by secret pacts of soft power, where rulers agreed to share the tools of civilization itself. This perspective challenges the old, simplistic story of history as a series of heroic conquests. It reveals our past as a far more complex tapestry, woven with both the bright, public threads of declared wars and the secret, often stronger, strands of private promises. To ignore these hidden forces is to see only the surface of the map, missing the intricate web of influence that lies just beneath, a web that quietly guided the fate of nations and the destiny of our world. From the Hittite-Egyptian peace to the Tang-Turkic core, our journey through the shadows reveals a profound truth about history. The public story of kings and conquests is only the surface. The true architects of the ancient world were often the secret partners, the silent strategists who understood that a whispered promise could be more powerful than 1,000 shouted battle cries. These 27 clandestine pacts remind us that our world was shaped not only on battlefields, but in sealed letters, in whispered oaths sworn in felt tents, and in the quiet understanding between two rulers who chose pragmatism over pride. They teach us the enduring power of cooperation, of long-term strategy, and sometimes of necessary deception in guiding the course of human destiny. The map of the ancient East was never a fixed document. It was a fluid, living entity constantly being redrawn by these invisible hands. Borders shifted, dynasties rose, and cultures merged, all according to plans made far from the public eye. As we reflect on these hidden chapters, it invites a compelling question for our own time. What silent agreements, what unspoken understandings between powers great and small might be quietly sculpting the world we live in today? The lessons of the shadows are timeless. If you found this journey into the clandestine corridors of power fascinating, subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. We would love to hear which of these secret alliances surprised you the most, so share your thoughts in the comments